So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about probability and just in general how we can use probability to be better players. So, Vanquish Soul, I think, is a decent deck that we could use for this. So, alright. If we do not open Rosin, so in this hand we have a way to Rosin. Let's see. So, this hand actually has a way into Rosin too. Yeah, can we get a hand with a way to Rosin for a second? Just what, please? This kind of doesn't have a way into Rosin. Alright, so for this hand in particular, how many cards do I have? I can actually draw to unbrick. So right now, I have several options to take, but Stake Your Soul, if this gets ashed, I guess that's bad, but we could do this to Special Summon Madlib, equip the Rendell, and then actually that gives us Rosin access, so we have Rosin access in this hand. Alright, we need a worse hand. Worse. Okay, now this is more like it. Alright. So essentially, all this does is we grab Fenrir, and then we can grab Rise Heart, and yeah, that's it. So, how many ways do we have into Rosin now? So, right now, with this particular list, we have 1, 2, 3 cards. So, we have 3 copies of Rosin in the main deck still. We have 3 copies of Stake Your Soul. We have 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, and then we have 2 copies of Durendal. And every single one of those will lead us into essentially Rosin. But let's see. So we have 38 cards remaining in deck. So that's 38. And then we just have to count how many cards we have left for, or how many cards that essentially give us Rosin. So that's 3, 6, 7, 9 copies of Rosin. So that would be 9 over 38, and those are kind of the ratios. So to figure out like the percentage, we just would take 9 and divide that by 38. So that is 0.236842. Yeah, lots of numbers here. But essentially that is a 0.23, which it means, well, 0.23, that would be like out of 100 off of the, or the whole number 1. Yeah, I don't know how to explain this, but essentially it's 23%, okay? So that's a 23% chance, like, right now, if I were to draw a card, the next card will be Rosin, or lead us into Rosin. So, about a 1 in 5 chance, approximately, right? So about 20% chance, more or less, but we can think of it like that. So, if we draw 5, there's a pretty decent chance we'll see a way into Rosin, but it could take a while. I mean, at worst, it can get pretty bad, I guess. So here, relatively early, but you know, we could get ashed at this point. So the earliest point I would assume that we can really consistently get the Rosin in this case will be here. But actually, technically, if you think about it more, technically we would have shuffled our deck, so this isn't even the correct deck order to an extent, but doesn't matter that much because we can't really control that in this. But yeah, okay. Let's look for the next Rosin now. Oh wow, I'm just blatantly cheating. I'm stacking my deck. What is this? That was such an early Rosin. What? Yeah. So with the power of probability, we can determine how screwed we are in a situation, the odds of drawing an out, right? So let's assume now, after this, we're at this point in the game, we have 27 cards in the deck, and we need maybe exactly Harpy's Feather Duster, right? So what are the odds at this state in the game? Like, we're going to assume we maybe searched a bit more cards, sure, so we'll go 24 deep. So now we have maybe 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, and we have 24 cards in deck. That would be 1 in 24. And what are the odds on this? 0.04. 16666. Yeah, okay. So about 4%. chance that the next card here will be Harpy's Feather Duster. And it was, in fact, not Harpy's Feather Duster, so we, in fact, may lose the game on the spot if we needed to draw a Duster exactly for turn at this point in the game. So, yeah, that's right. Probability, baby. So, that's one way you can use probability to calculate the odds of your opponent drawing a specific out, or for you to draw a specific out to what your opponent has. Assuming you need like a specific card to deal with something. So let's assume perhaps you're staring down like Kashira Arisar and you're playing a deck that is just not so good into cash. So we're going to assume we actually have 35 cards left in deck, right? So out of these cards, which ones can actually deal with Kashira Arisar? So maybe we only run one copy of Triple Tactics Talents and then one copy of Infinite Impermanence. We can calc this too. So that would be 4 cards out of our remaining 35 in deck. So we just do 4 over 35. Yep. And then we divide 4 by 35, which gives us 0.11. So an 11% chance, give or take, to just, top deck, I guess, the exact out for Arisar exactly. And in this deck, we actually have more outs, don't we? But yeah, this actually happens to be an out. Crazy. In this case, in this deck, we actually do have 5, crazily enough. And this is one of the outs. Wow. Which this would happen to me in a real game. But yeah. Even if you know there is a path to victory, I mean, it is not that likely, so scooping could be like an option if you're not willing to wait for the draw. But if you wait for the draw, 1 in 10 games, we'll win. If our opponent makes the Rise and we had no way to stop it in this case with this exact list, if it did matter, I suppose. So it's like a very specific situation where you have to calc, but it's still useful, right? And then if I were to let's say be playing against this list in particular, let's say we out a Rosin, so we just banish the only Rosin currently in rotation. What are the odds of my opponent actually getting another way into Rosin? We could calc that too, just generally knowing that there's probably at least 3 Stake Your Soul, 1 Rhoda, and then 2 more copies of Rosin, and then there's definitely a Fire in hand, so like probably a Jiaolong that was searched off of the Rosin earlier at some point. So knowing this, we have, let's assume that we searched a few times, so maybe we're at like 32 cards or something. So out of these 32 cards, we have how many remaining? 5. So that would be 5 in 32. So we can do that. Do the math on that. 0.15. So about, give or take, 15% chance that my opponent will randomly draw a way into Rosin. Assuming I can't stop it like it's a Rhoda or Stake Your Soul. Maybe I don't have Ash for it. Maybe I do. Then if I have Ash, then actually the number will lower from these 4, because these 4 are not going to be activatable. So it's going to actually be 2 in 32 cards. So the odds for my opponent to actually be able to draw Rosin, and we're going to assume drawing Rosin will just win them the game from here, right? Whatever situation, 0.06%. So about 6% chance, give or take a little bit. We just need to know the general estimates. Even if we don't get the straight up probability, just knowing about the ratios is kind of helpful. So let's say if we have 10 out of 30-ish cards, that's about 30% odds of just top decking something, because 1 out of 3 of the remaining cards in their deck are a potential like just 1 card starter or something, and that would be an immediate just win. We can do calcs like that, and they're just particularly helpful for evaluating certain plays to see if you should like go for something or not. So something like if your opponent drops a Max E on you, you can actually just infer somewhat what cards are actually in my opponent's hand. What cards do I have to contest here? And then what deck are they playing? What ratios does that deck typically play? So you can actually find out a lot and make pretty good decisions off of this. So in this case, maybe for non-engine, we have enough room for, like, let's see, with Vanquish Soul, let's say, of how many hand traps in this build? 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. So maybe around like 12-ish if you run like Magma and stuff. And I guess I have Shifter here, so it's like about 12, give or take. So if I were to cut this down back to 40, I would start by removing Red Reboot. But anyways, aside from that, we have about, let's say, how many hand traps here? Like, if I am not able to really play, then I probably have mostly hand traps. And then how many starters do I actually have in this deck? It's like 1, 2, 3, 4 really good cast starters. So we have those, and then maybe we have like an Ash Blossom in hand or some kind of other fire that I can't summon. Like in this case, it could be like Jiaolong or something. Could be just like Heavy Burger, so I could use this to summon at least Madlib to start drawing, I guess. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's like 7 out of 35. So if I were to just pass after my opponent were to drop a Maxi on me during the standby phase, what are the odds of my opponent actually drawing playable? 0.2. So about 1 in 5 chance to draw some kind of starter. But I mean, of course, if I do have like an imperm, then the only thing that would be able to stop me here would be a crossout, which the odds of my opponent having that is just straight up, we're going to assume they're playing a 40 card deck. So we know they don't have a Rosin, for example, if my opponent is on Vanquish Soul, because they would have just normal summoned it turn 1. There's like no reason not to do so, to build advantage and whatnot. So we just know they don't have this. And then if my opponent dropped Maxi, we also do know they have 2 more copies of Maxi in the deck. Like a lot of random info that we can just infer. And then if there's actually a trigger during certain timings, we can also infer like kind of what cards they have. Like maybe like a Dimension Shifter, we can kind of infer if our opponent has one or not. Just off of just if you're not like super tryharding and controlling triggers very hard, you can infer this information. And then just judging off of that, like there are a lot of cards that could be unknowns. Like you wouldn't know for sure if someone was playing Evenly, Duster, or whatnot, but you do know the amount of cards being played and cards that are probably in your opponent's deck because they're playing like a certain strategy, right? Like if we see a Snake Eye Ash being normal summoned, there's a pretty high chance that we will also have a Flamberge somewhere in the deck. So it could be in deck or in hand. And for it to be in hand, there is that the probability of this works a little bit different for like if you were to card open a card, but it's 10% odds because you draw 5 to start, right? So in your opening hand, there's a 10% chance for you to have a 1 of, about a 20% chance to have a 2 like a 2 of in your hand, just a 2 of at all. So maybe in this case it would be like 2 of Maxi, 20% chance C Maxi. So there's an 80% chance you do not have Maxi in the hand. And right now, like maybe I don't have an Ash Blossom, but I can just make the Reckless play that plays harder into Maxi and gives more draws for Maxi specifically, and not be punished too hard because it's just 1 in 5. But that would be just a decision you're choosing, I guess. And yeah, math. So Yeah. If we were to also look at the ratios here, for example, the ratios for this deck, it's about 50% spell traps and 50% monsters, which honestly, I don't think it is that good for Vanquish Soul. But if we were to just look at this, we can also do a little bit of estimation. So let's say I know for a fact my opponent top deck Mad Love for turn, then there's a pretty decent chance, like it's not going to be guaranteed or anything, that my opponent's next card is going to just be a spell or trap that they're going to top deck. Well, in this case, this would be my own deck, so I'm pretty certain that my next top deck will likely be spell or trap. It's not like guaranteed to be one, but uh, it's more likely than a monster, specifically because now I have one less monster in my deck because I drew the Mad Love, right? And off of these ratios, you can kind of also think ahead and think of likely plays that you're going to be doing, because you're more likely to be drawing a spell trap, and like what spell traps do you have left? Just little things like that. Those are like small optimizations. You can also kind of figure out potentially like how many cards does my opponent have in deck and how many are actually threatening, what are the odds of them drawing into them, what are the odds my opponent draws like the exact one of that I know they're probably playing to like out my board. So like maybe let's say Subversion will immediately end the game if they happen to draw it because they have Original Sinful in the graveyard as well, and they have kind of combo. They can like add Oak from deck, but you have a negate for Oak. But if they draw exactly Subversion because you know they're for some reason out of imperms, that or your monster is specifically not affected by traps. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. But if they top deck specifically a Subversion, you know exactly the odds of that, right? And you can play around it, well, all of these different options accordingly. So yeah, I mean, feels pretty bad to think about, but if your opponent like really stacks you hard, like if they just had I guess like Fenrir and then Snake Eye Ash and then like Bonfire and Diabellstar or something, like I guess that kind of hand would be really annoying. But we can account for like if our opponent has additional extenders as well using math. So I can just do general estimates because in an opening hand, essentially like for every copy you play of a thing, you have about a 10% chance of opening it, give or take. So like it's not like 1-to-1 because probability, right? So if we run 7 copies of a card, it's not exactly a 70% chance to open that card. Not exactly, right? It's probably closer to 60%, I think. Maybe it's like 66% or something at a certain point. But yeah, to open just a one of relating to that card. So if we were to go ahead and I guess we'll just butcher this list real quick. And then we'll just generate a Snake Eye list. So if we generate a Snake Eye list, so let's assume we're playing against our opponent here and we have some hand traps. So my opponent, let's say they're on Snake Eye. They start by normal summoning Snake Eye Ash, right? So Snake Eye Ash, there is 10% chance for them to open Snake Eye Ash, which is just fine, right? So if we imperm this, they might have an extender. So what extenders could our opponent possibly have after normal summon Snake Eye Ash? We have Bonfire for Poplar. We have 1-for-1. This shouldn't be here still, but all right, 1-for-1 for Poplar if they have another monster in hand, which judging by these ratios, right, we run more monsters than spell traps, so good odds to at least have one other monster. So knowing, well, it's not guaranteed, I suppose, but knowing our opponent will have probably about a 50-50-ish split in monsters, then knowing we've already seen Snake Eye Ash, our opponent probably has, just off of general probability, they probably have either one or two more monsters in hand. And this is just ratios, right? So we have Snake Eye Ash. So then the next card, they could drop like anything. We could drop a Bonfire. That would be 2 or 3 spell traps, I guess. So that's within expectations if they drop a Bonfire here. That's possible. But the odds of having Bonfire or Wanted, I guess, we'll go with that, would be 30% just to open one of these. So the odds of having Snake Eye Ash and Wanted or Bonfire, we don't have to calc that. We don't need to know that. Not that important unless you really want to feel miserable. Like, wow, my opponent hit that 0.1% chance to open like all of these cards against my specific hand, and I thought it was pretty good hand too. Sad. So yeah, we don't have to worry about that too much because that doesn't really help you win the game necessarily. But okay, 30% chance to have a Wand Seeker Sinful Spoils. And then if we look at Diabell Star as well, then we have 3 copies of Diabell here. So overall, well, actually, wait, we have 1 for 1 as well. So overall, what are the odds that after normal summon Snake Eye Ash, our opponent has no play? There is about a 30% chance in this list, right? Because they could have 1 for 1, Wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils, Bonfire, Diabell Star. So, okay, let's say our opponent now does a Diabell Star special summon, sending maybe Snake Eye Ash. It doesn't really matter to me personally. And then they'll attempt to original Sinful, and then we'll maybe, I guess it'll be like Ash, original Sinful Spoils, I guess. Or maybe we also imperm Diabell Star. It doesn't really matter, just we interrupt, right? And this now, at the current game state, their board does nothing, right? Maybe they pitched a card from hand as well. Who knows? It doesn't really matter too much. All right, in this current state, now we have Snake Eye Ash plus Diabell Star, because, you know, this is pretty within expectations, because there was a 70% chance they either had, like, something like a 1 for 1, Bonfire, Wand Seeker, or Diabell Star itself. Okay, so now if my opponent were to have something else after this, so Wanted is going to be dead, because it's just going to grab another copy of Diabell Star, not really accomplishing much. They have no additional normal summon, so if they had either a Poplar or Oak in hand, not usable. But we're going to assume that they do not have Poplar in hand. If they have a Bonfire now, that would be 20% chance, but just in general, right? To have this in any starting hand. So in this particular hand, they could still have a Bonfire because they just resolved Monster Effect 1, Monster Effect 2, and maybe they also sent another monster, like maybe they discard, who knows, Effect Veiler, oh, Maxi, Nibiru. That doesn't matter. Now we know their last card in hand, good chance that it's going to be Called by the Grave, not cross out because they would have crossed out it imperm. So not likely this. It could be, in this case, infinite impermanence as well. So we don't actually know if someone's like running Droplet necessarily, or Triple Tactics, so we don't know about that. They could be running Duster. You wouldn't know 100% for sure, but you can kind of take pot shots and kind of guess at certain things. So for example, like with infinite impermanence, this is a 3 of in almost every single deck, pretty much. So there is about a 30% chance that any given opponent has infinite impermanence. So 70% of the time you'll just be perfectly fine against infinite impermanence because it simply doesn't exist. But if we were to play around specifically just infinite impermanence, that's playing around something we're only seeing about 30% of the time. If Effect Veiler and infinite impermanence are being played together, it's like 60% chance that you'll see either. So it's about a coin flip if your opponent has any of these cards, right? So if we had something to protect from targeting, like I guess Fire King, there is about 60% chance that you'll kind of screw over your opponent, and your opponent goes -1 from not being able to use one of their targeted effects of like infinite impermanence or Effect Failure then. So yeah, maths. And okay, so from here, after using this and this, 80% chance that you're perfectly fine having no other hand trap here. And then if they do have bonfire, that's just a 20% chance. And then from there, maybe they have full combo off of the bonfire summon poplar. So that would be potentially kind of unlucky, I suppose. Depends. So for this, I think negating the Bellstar with Imperm wasn't even that good. You could have actually waited for Poplar, right? Because there's no other extender after they've used the Bellstar and the Poplar. The Bonfire is kind of just dead because they already normal summoned the Snake Ash as well. So if we wait for Poplar to be special summon off of original Sinful, probably sending Diabellstar, and then we imprint this, there should be no play aside from exactly 1-for-1 special summoning Oak, assuming there's also still a discard for 1-for-1. So 20% chance of this, and then 1-for-1, so that's like 30% chance of having any starter extender or whatever remaining. So yeah, just hard calcing and figuring out what your opponent has. So in this hand in particular, right, I have Maxi, which my opponent has. In this case, with this particular build, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So about 60% chance this Maxi does not resolve. So not really something we should count on resolving here. If we look at Ash Blossom Geospring, we have 1, 2, 3 cards right here. So there is a 1 in 3 chance that this Ash Blossom will not resolve. So that's just based off of like what our opponent has in the main deck here, or this deck list, right? So this is probably going to do us a lot better than the Maxi, just in this matchup in general, just more consistently doing something. This is resolving 60% of the time. This is going to be resolving against this deck list in particular 40 well, it's going to be resolving 40% of the time. This is resolving 60% of the time. So this is activating 20% more often, which is like the odds of opening Back Filler or Infirm. Infirm is only going to be negatable by Crossout Designator 10% of the time, because maths. If we were running a Bestial, if it's relevant, Bestials resolve practically 100% of the time because they're like pretty unstoppable. In this deck list in particular, there's actually a Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion here, so there's actually a 10% chance that Magnemite does not resolve in particular, right? And that's without even considering like the impact of the card. So Ash Blossom, if we were to do the calc here, I think this is not able to stop the entirety of Snake Eye that often. So if we were to just normal summon Snake Eye Ash or Poplar, or have just one starter in general, Ash would just trade 1-for-1 for it, and there's just no combo, right? But if they have an extender, so the odds of that, so we can calc it like this. So we have one starter here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards here that I will just call stars. Actually, there's 9 here because 1-for-1, so that's 4, 9, 10. Yeah, 10. So we have 10 starters here. So I don't even know how to calculate that, but it's probably like 70-80% chance to open any starter. Just a rough estimate, really. But yeah. So if you open any one of these starters, that lowers your other starters down to 9. So there is 9 in 40 chance to like kind of have these stars still, but then you draw 5. So maths. But anyways, 9 cards remain. So out of these 9, you have 1 less draw. So from here, it's like your remaining 4 cards in hand to be a starter. The odds are pretty high, right? So the odds for this would be like about, let's see, 3, 9, like what, 60-70%, something like that, probably. Well, actually, it was 80% probably to have a star, so it's like 67 or yeah, 60-70ish % chance, or maybe still like high 70. Who knows? I'm not actually doing the calcs, just estimations, to have an additional starter slash extender, because all these are kind of starter extenders, right? So this one might not be activatable because potentially you don't have a discard for this. This one, it might not be activatable because you already normal summon. In this case, it'll be Snake Eye Ash. This one might not be activatable if you already have Popular in hand, but we're going to assume that there is no Popular in hand because there's only a 1 in 10 chance of having your 1 of Popular in hand. So, with the remaining maths we have here, we have about 6 starters here that I would say you would have after normal summon Snake Eye Ash in particular. So, or starter extenders or whatever, right? And then you technically have Original Sinful, which is also 1, I guess, from this position. So that's like 7, right? So 7-ish starters remaining. So we're looking at about 70, maybe 70, 60-ish percent, right? Of having an additional starter. So that means about, let's see, 40% of the time, I believe then, the Ash Blossom Joy Spring will be enough to stop the entire turn. 60% of the time, it will not, though. So about 2 out of 3 games, your opponent will have like starters or extenders after this, but also keeping in mind that if they didn't have Called by the Grave, that means they would have different cards in their hand. So that would be like Diabell Star, Bonfire, what Original Sinful Spoils. So if they don't have like non-engine, that means they probably have engine, I guess, or hand traps, something like that. And you're able to just make more efficient usage out of your hand traps just by doing some probability maps and kind of like working on your opponent's decks like this, I guess, right? So this isn't the best deck for this, but if we had a Blue Eyes list, we can calc like a crazy amount of things. So if we did specifically, for example, let's say a Blue Eyes player does normal summon Sage with Eyes of Blue to add Effect Veiler, that means 100% of the time, in my opinion, that they should have either a Maiden of White or they have a Wishes, which can add Maiden of White. But no one would logically want to add Maiden, I don't think, off of the Wishes. And just for security, in case you get like hand trapped after this point, right? You would want Maiden, so you can go like Maiden, set True Light, and then activate Wishes. Or maybe even if the Wishes gets negated, you would want to True Light for potentially Roar, so we can go Roar, Summon, Maiden, and then Spirit Pass. So something like that, or we could even Seals Pass from that position, I believe. But you would want to have that additional play, so off of just normal Summon Sage with Eyes of Blue, we can infer a lot of things from our opponent's hand, right? So we know that Blue Eyes, they should be playing 3 Maiden. So that means they have, like, very likely 0 copies of Maiden in their hand, or they have at least 1 copy. They could potentially have 2 copies even, depending on what they search here. If they search Maiden, they have 0 copies. If they search Effect Veiler, they could have anywhere from 1 to 3 copies of Maiden. And this is just some, like, little things you can do with probability here. And I mean, you don't necessarily want to allow Sage to necessarily resolve either, so it's not always going to come up, but it's just about the little logic puzzles you can kind of do to infer like your opponent's exact hand. You can kind of figure it out from there, right? So we can account for like maybe if Spirit with Eyes of Blue, like if let's assume we see Wishes resolve, right? So let's assume maybe I have an Imperm and Sage, we might let this resolve or not. That's up to us. And then Spirit with Eyes of Blue, we might want to negate this for to prevent Mausoleum. So let's say the entire line is going to be like normal summon Ether Burl, and then Spirit with Eyes of Blue, and then they'll like Sage with Eyes of Blue, right? Normal summon to add Maiden or something, or maybe Effect Veller. It doesn't really matter what they're doing exactly with Sage. We don't necessarily want them to get access to Maiden like this. Maybe we know they don't have wishes because we ashed it already. Who knows? Either way, prevent them from maybe getting Maiden because we don't have many good imperm points left. Maybe we're considering to imperm Spirit with Eyes of Blue, right? So the issue with imperm Spirit with Eyes of Blue is this monster effectively does nothing if you already have the Mausoleum. It doesn't really matter too much, honestly. So if they already have the Mausoleum, then they can always do normal summons Sage with Eyes of Blue. And maybe they have, because they have the Primate stuff, they have Lordly Load, which can be used to make Spirit. And maybe Spirit is like really bad matchup for your deck in particular with the Graveyard Negate. Like, I don't know, maybe you're playing, let's say, Orcust or something. Then you're going to like just lose if they're allowed to make Spirit, right? So the idea that you want to stop Spirit with Eyes of Blue from searching Mausoleum to prevent the normal summon of Sage, so then grab Maiden, is like something pretty reasonable, because otherwise they're making just hieratic seals and just passing. But there's actually a small flaw with this play. So the flaw is called but what if my opponent actually already has the Mausoleum? 1 in 10 chance. So 90% of the time that it might be a good play, and 10% of the time it's awful because they already had the Mausoleum and did not need to search it. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like math and like just application for it in a lot of different situations. I mean, I'd have to be playing a duel to like really go through it. So I guess we can kind of go through something. I don't think I have any like really good duels though, but I guess we can check. So let's go to replays, and let's go for, I guess, this should be okay, I think. So let's see. If you know the ratios, you can kind of guesstimate how many like types of cards are in your opponent's hand off of like the ratios, right? It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's useful for things, right? So, all right, Lubellion. Special summon? Nothing. All right. Magnemat. Banish Serenator. Shuffle. The Bat. Special summon Lubellion. Grab Branded Beast. We're going to do this. Cycle through a little bit. Get an extra draw. Cool. Set that. Pass. So here, our opponent drops Fuelos. So this by itself doesn't mean that much, honestly. Not yet, anyways. But right here, off of the Labyrinth Stovey Torby pitch the Fuelos, we actually have a lot more information now about our opponent's deck. It's not going to be that much, but so I'm going to assume right now that our opponent is playing the max copy of Stovey Torby. So they have 2 copies of Stovey Torby, and 1 was in hand. That means the other is either also in hand or in the deck. It's much more likely to be in the deck. So yeah, they have 1 copy of Torby in deck, and then after they set that Big Welcome, they now have 2 copies of Big Welcome. So for dead draws right now, we can say that's 3 out of, I guess they haven't drawn yet, have they? Yeah, wait, 35. Where'd they set that Big Welcome from deck? Does that mean they're playing 41 cards? I guess they're playing 41 cards. So that's 3 divided by 35. So they have an 8% chance of having a dead draw already. If they draw either a Big Welcome or a Stovey Torby. They also have a Mulcharmy Fuelos actually. So I don't know exactly the ratios for this, but if they're playing Mulcharmy Fuelos, I'm going to assume, I can't assume with 100% certainty that this is also going to be played at 3. So I'm going to assume this is just played at 2, and that means they also have a 2 of Max C. So that's also technically somewhat a dead draw, in my opinion. If I do absolutely nothing, that would be completely a dead draw, right? But yeah. So we have figured out a good amount of cards in the deck, and then let's see. Because they're playing Labyrinth, you also know the general ratios for the Labyrinth cards. So we have Big Welcome 3. Welcome will be either at 2 or 3, so we're going to assume the low end and go with maybe 2 copies. So we can kind of infer from that that's in our opponent's deck just from this knowledge, and we're actually building quite a profile here. And I don't know 100% what they will draw, but you know, maths. Okay, Dominus Impulse. We also have this information now, so how many cards do we actually know from our opponent? So we play 3 Ariana, at least 2 Mulcharmy Fuelos, 2 Stovitorbi, 3 Big Welcome, and then we go through the list, and we've already built a bit of a profile, and we can kind of figure out how many non-engine slots they actually have for things. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they're running 3 Impulse as well. So we have that math to kind of do as well, right? So let's see. 3, 3. I think we have about a third of this guy's deck figured out, or a little bit more than that. They probably have Ash Blossom Joe's Ring as well. Or maybe not. Do you run Ash Blossom in this? I don't remember. Also, they are playing Draglair. So after that resolves, we know they're playing likely 2 Draglair as well. So yeah, before my opponent even really got to play, I mean, they kind of gave up here, I guess. Because I guess their hand's Turbo Ass or something. Well, I mean, I guess I have this to top back row. So I guess it's not really that good anyways. Did they misclick the wrong card? I think they meant to add Ariana, surely. Is the Stovey Torby with like triggered, right? From the graveyard? Off of the big welcome? Like, I guess. But yeah. Well, let's see how much of this was correct. Details from opponent's deck. Okay, so they play 3 Fulos, 2 Maxi, and we can assume they were playing Ku Klux, yeah. So all of this is about expected. I wasn't really sure about Arias, but if Arias is typically played, then yeah, we could figure this out as well. Drama. Yeah, we can kind of figure out that Drama is usually typically played, and it's either going to be 2 or 3 copies because you need to at least play 2 for Trap Trick. So because of Trap Trick, a lot of these cards will be at least 2 copies, right? And here we go, yeah. 2 Welcome, 3 Big Welcome, and there are no copies of Ash Blossom. We do not know about Nibiru. So no information on that, and this card isn't necessarily always played, I don't think. Labyrinth. So we don't have 100% information on that. Dimensional Barrier is not necessarily always played either. Rollback is definitely not always played either, right? So no information on that, but Triple Trap Trick is pretty normal. We could guess that just off of like reference to Vitor resolving, so we could have figured that out. Linear Equation Cannon is kind of like not always something you would play necessarily. So this, we don't have like guaranteed info on this. But essentially just off of resolving the Stovi Torby, we have a crap ton of information, and resolving Fulos means I'm pretty much expecting Maxi as well, right? Because typically, Mulcharmy Fulos is actually just the worst version of Maxi, right? But that just means they wanted more Maxis, usually, and this would not be the only thing they're running, right? So the inference, if you see like Mulcharmies, means there probably are Maxis in the deck as well. So it's not necessarily like in the deck, it could be in the hand as well, but you know. High chance your opponent is just playing this stuff, right? So yeah, lots of mapping done. So dimensional barrier, we didn't know for sure, but also with the monster to trap ratio, I don't know. I didn't 100% know the distribution for like a lab in particular, but I do know you're playing at least one of these. I'm not 100% sure the ratios for a Lady Lab that you would typically play, so I'm not like certain about those. I could look it up if I really cared, though, I guess. Lady or Lovely Lab, I do know is a one of, so we can infer a crap ton of information from our opponent, and then off of like as the game goes on, I can actually just off of that profile I've built, I can uh somewhat accurately uh somewhat accurately like predict my opponent's like draws off of like probability, because this is about the distribution of monsters to spell traps I kind of expected to see after seeing like the labyrinth furniture, I guess, right? And also Maxi Full Loss. About makes sense, I guess. And yeah, that's about it, I guess, right? Yeah, this was a three of, like I expected. Three of, two of. Yep. So yeah, this is what being a nerd gets you, I guess. When we can figure out our opponent's draws or potential draws off of this. And I guess it's kind of a powerful tool. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.